Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We apologize for rescheduling this meeting, so we know that we'll probably have a smaller group joining us today, and we thank you for your time in joining us if you are with us live. If not, we hope you have a chance to watch this recorded video of the webinar, and if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us, sending me an email, and my email will be at the end of this webinar here if you'd like to see that, if you need any help with questions or anything. So we are here today to talk about math and basic concepts. And this is the last webinar in our series of webinars on Project Ready. So we're going to cover today the curriculum-based assessment that we talked about a little bit with our scheduling and planning your day webinar. And we're going to talk about basic concepts and math lessons and what that looks like in the Project Ready curriculum. So the curriculum-based assessment, and I'm not sure if everyone can see this or if your video is showing it, you can kind of move your video over to see the wording on the screen to be able to see everything. But the curriculum-based assessment, we call it CBA, so I'll refer to it as CBA pretty often here, was designed by Dr. Amy Murdoch. It is a fun, engaging, joyful way to gather basic information about our students. It's done individually and it's quick. It's about 7 to 8 minutes total. And this is a still from a video of me doing the CBA with my son, and you can tell that we're both just having a great time and we're really engaged and enjoying learning about his skill level there. So these are the materials that you need for the CBA, really fun, playful things. We need name cards, number cards, a little car, blocks with different colors on them, a shape puzzle with simple shapes, and then a little teddy bear that helps make the activities a little bit more fun and engaging. And the CBA recording sheet looks like this. At the top, you put some basic information about the student, their name, the examiner's name, their date of birth, if English is their first language or not. And then we have a summary of scores here where you can kind of write down scores and see those at a glance. And then we go into our different sections of the CBA. And part one is colors, where we're learning about students' knowledge of colors. So with the CBA, we're just kind of gathering knowledge about a student's knowledge of students' basic concepts like colors, counting, numbers, shapes, name recognition, the alphabet song, and name writing. And then we have recently added in a piece about small number recognition without counting. That is an Ohio Early Learning State Standard, and we've added that in because we found that that's something we kind of need to gather information on our students about if they have that knowledge. So after we've assessed our students with the CBA, the question is, what do we do with these results? We know that we always want to be using our assessments for a purpose. Our assessments are used to guide our instruction. So we will take the information that we gather about our students from the CBA, and then we use that information for what we call basic concepts or our math groups. So basic concepts are for students who need more exposure to these early skills, these basic concept skills like colors and shapes. And then our math groups are guided by students' knowledge of math skills. So we place them in groups accordingly. So here, just a reminder of where these two pieces fall in our overview of the entire curriculum here. This is an overview of all of the pieces in the Project Ready curriculum. So you see math there is outlined in blue. That means it is connected to the theme and it is one of our small groups. And then basic concepts is outlined in yellow. It is not connected to the theme, and we consider it an additional intervention material. So it is not necessarily used with all of our students. So let's start by talking about basic concepts and what that is and how we use it. So we know that basic concepts are independent of the theme, and they're included in the curriculum for our students who demonstrate a need for more exposure in the following areas: colors, shapes, opposites, and relative size. So we know those four concepts are things that students either come to preschool having a lot of exposure to. They already know their color names, their shapes, opposites, relative size, like small, medium, and large, or they just haven't had much exposure to it. So if students demonstrate a need for exposure to those concepts, we can use our basic concepts piece there. So this is from the front cover of our basic concepts manual, and just like all of our materials, you'll find this on the website. So if you're interested in learning more about basic concepts, you can go to our website and you'll look for this graphic here that's tied to our basic concept. So within our basic concepts manual, you'll see there's a list of books for each of those concepts. So there's a list of color books, shape books, opposite books, and relative size books. And we've included kind of a picture of the book to help you find that book pretty easily, whether you're trying to purchase it or looking for it at the library. There's a picture of what it looks like to help you identify if that's the book we're referring to. And then we also include there just kind of a basic breakdown of the book. If it ties well with a specific unit, we note that. So here you can see that the Eat Your Colors book ties really well with the My Amazing Body unit, because within that unit, we talk a lot about healthy eating. So this book ties in really well with that unit. And then we also note exactly what colors are introduced in that book. So you can see that in this book, they talk about red, orange, yellow, green, and blue. The list of books, and this goes for all of our concepts, whether it's a color book or shape book or relative size book or opposite book, they are all kind of listed in order from shorter books with fewer examples of the concept. So here, these are color books. So the books at the top here will have fewer colors and they're shorter books. And then it advances to longer books with more of the concept. So more colors for our color books. The only material really that we have to go along with our basic concepts is a set of foam shapes. And this, unfortunately, is not a picture of our exact foam shapes that we use, but it, I think, does a great job of representing what we use here. So we take just the little foam craft paper and we cut out a variety of shapes in a variety of colors. And we started with just kind of the basic shapes and very basic colors, like the colors of the rainbow. And the teachers that we were working with asked for more shapes and more colors. So you can see that we really include all of these shapes in all of these colors. So we have a nice large set of those, but because they are just foam craft paper, they store really neatly and they're very small. So we use those materials within the basic concepts unit to teach our colors and our shapes. So we have a list of books, but we also have a list of activities that you can choose from. So you can see here on this page, these are some activities that teach the naming of colors. So we start with a 3-part lesson, an activity called What Color and in I Spy. And then there's a few other pages with color activities that you can do. I want to take just a minute to kind of go over that 3-part lesson, because I think that's a concept that not a lot of people have. It kind of comes from my Montessori background. I am Montessori certified, and this is kind of a classic way of introducing new knowledge to students in the Montessori classroom. So here, if you're choosing to do the 3-part lesson with your students, you're going to read that book that you've chosen, and then you're going to follow the 3 steps for that kind of classic Montessori 3-part lesson. So the first part of the 3-part lesson is this is. So you're going to set out your shapes and you're going to point to them, and you're going to give students the knowledge and the information that you want them to have. So you're going to say, this is a triangle, this is a square, this is a circle. So you're giving them exactly the names that you want them to use there. And then the second step is point to or show me. So you're going to ask the students to use their finger or non-verbally in some way show you that they understand the information. So show me the triangle, and they'll point to the triangle. Show me the circle, and they'll point to the circle. If you're using shapes, or you can use the same lesson for color. So show me the red, show me the yellow. And then the third part of that 3-part lesson is tell me. So that's where we're really asking students to use their voice, to use their vocabulary to tell us the name of the color or the shape or whatever concept it is that we've gone over. And we want to be careful here not to move to the third part of that lesson until we're really certain that students are comfortable and confident with that information. So with the 3-part lesson, you might just stop at that second part, show me, if you can tell that your students aren't quite ready to tell you the information that you've given them in the lesson. So we've got kind of a scripted piece of the lesson here, and then we have underneath options for easy, medium, and hard. So as you're moving through and using your knowledge of your students, you can choose, do I want to do a lesson that's a little bit on the easier side? Do I have maybe some younger students or some students who don't have great exposure to this concept yet? And I'm going to choose this easy option. or I have the option to choose a harder one. If I know I've got older students or they have a little bit more exposure to the concept, I'm going to take those steps that are listed there under the hard option. So we've got some differentiation there, even within each of those lessons that you can do. So again, we cover with basic concepts, we cover the 4 concepts: color, shape, opposites, and relative size. And for relative size, we also have another set of materials here that you just need to print and laminate. So we've got some common classroom items in small, medium, and large. So you would, ahead of time as the teacher, you would kind of print these and laminate them and cut them out. And then students would be able, within the lesson, to sort small, medium, and large. So within all 4 of those concepts, we have a list of books that you can choose from, and we have a list of activities that you can choose from using those materials that we went over. Okay, or we've gone over. So in summary, basic concepts are independent of our theme. They are considered an intervention for students who need more exposure to the basic concepts, and they target student needs with a choice of book and a choice of activity. So you've got a lot of flexibility there to really meet the needs of your students. And you can even double up the concepts for kind of maximum exposure. Like you could teach color and shape at the same time. If you have students who are ready for that, you could use something along the lines of, this is a yellow triangle, this is an orange square. So really hitting at both of those concepts at once if your students are ready for it, so you can really maximize your time. We know that we don't have a lot of instructional time in the classroom, so if our students are ready for it, we want to make our lessons as powerful as possible there. So those are some options with our basic concepts. All right, so let's talk about how we use the results of the CBA to help us with our math groups. Okay, we already know that from the CBA, we can learn a little bit about our students' exposure to those basic concepts: shape, color, relative size, and opposites. And then we can also use the results of the CBA to help us with our math grouping. Okay, so our math instruction is always tied to a 1, 2, 3 storybook, which is related to our theme. So the book is always first introduced in the whole group setting. And then the second read with the math activity is done in a homogeneous small group. Okay. So this is an overview page. You'll find these at the front of each of our unit manuals. And this is the overview page for Asia, where you can see each of the books that are included in the Asia unit. And you can see this little, it looks like a blue cloud with numbers. It's kind of hard to see on this screen, but there's an open book with numbers coming out and kind of a blue cloud behind it. That's our symbol that we use for our math books. So when you're looking at the overview, you just find that symbol, and that's a pretty clear indication, oh, this is a math book. I'm first going to introduce it in the whole group, and then I can take my small groups or take this book to my small math groups to use for instruction. So within every unit, we have 2 to 4 math books. They're spread throughout the unit so that you've got kind of exposure to math concepts throughout that unit. And they usually have a counting theme, but sometimes our math books teach other concepts like measurement or weight with a balance scale. So we have a lot of reach with our math books there. So again, like we said before, our math books are always introduced in the whole group story with the 1, 2, 3 read. And this is a lesson plan for one of the math books from our Asia unit. It's called One Happy Tiger. So you can see at the top there, there's the math symbol. So as you're flipping through your manual, you look for that math symbol, and you know this is a math book here. You see all of the things that we have in our usual 1, 2, 3 story routine. We start with our language time, where we're really hitting that phonological awareness activity. And then we have some work that we do before relating the reading to our theme. We have some questions and some vocabulary you're going to pull out during the reading. And then we have some after activities, so asking some questions again. And then the follow-up activity for a 1, 2, 3 story that's a math book is always a math word problem. And the math word problem really is just kind of about introducing our young students to the language of math. And it's here at the bottom of that lesson plan. You can see the story word problem. So I've enlarged it here for us. This is the math word problem from our book, One Happy Tiger. And it's written out like this. So in black, you see kind of the instructions for the teacher, and the purple italicized is the scripting that you can use with your students. So it says, explain. I noticed there were 2 bright bugs and 4 floating butterflies. That's wording exactly from the story in this book. And you can show them those pictures to help them remember. And then you say to the students, I'm wondering how many bugs that is all together. So we're getting at the language of math there, all together. So then we say, if we want to know how many altogether, we have to do addition. Let's use our fingers to help us do that now. There were 2 bright bugs and there were 4 floating butterflies. Now let's count all of our fingers to help us figure out how many bugs and butterflies together. And you wiggle your fingers as you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2 bugs plus 4 butterflies equals 6 bugs all together. So you're getting at some of the language of math. You're practicing those concepts like addition or subtraction, or how many more, how many less, with our young students, introducing that in a really fun, quick way. So then the second read of our lesson or our second read of our book is always done in our small homogeneous groups. And it's always followed by an activity, a math activity that targets our knowledge level. So here you see our lesson plan for our second read of a math book. And you can see again, just like any of our second reads, we have some before activities where we're tying our book back to our theme. We're talking about the author and the illustrator. We have some things to do during the reading and some questions and things to ask afterward. Okay, so we still have a full lesson plan written out for our second read. And then here at the bottom, it says, do a math activity targeted to your student's skill level. Okay, so what does that mean when we talk about our students' math skill level? So we have kind of a new graphic to help us figure out our students' math skill level. And I should let you know that all of our math skills are tied into the Ohio Early Learning Standards, and those have changed recently. So we've reworked our math lessons just a little bit. Number one, in response to what we were seeing from the wonderful teachers and classrooms that we're working with right now, we've gotten a lot of feedback from them that's helped us kind of rework and refine our math work. And then we've also responded to the changes in the Ohio Early Learning Standards as well. So you can see here, kind of working top to bottom and left to right, we have our skills listed out in order. So number one, the first skill that we target is counting and number recognition. And as you go across left to right, we have sub-skills for counting and number recognition with numbers 1 to 5, number recognition without counting, numbers 1 to 5, counting and number recognition with numbers 6 to 10, and then counting and number recognition with numbers 11 to 20. So skills go top to bottom and left to right with sub-skills. So after counting and number recognition, we have more than, less than, same. We have addition, subtraction, and patterning, again with sub-skills kind of going across that also advance in difficulty or challenge level. So those colors that you saw, I'll flash back to it there. You see the green, yellow, and red going across in the sub-skills. Those colors relate back to our Ohio Early Learning Standards. So if you see something that is green, that means that skill is approaching the Ohio State Standard. It's listed as one of the indicators under the standard that leads to the final standard that we hope students have by the time they leave preschool. If you see yellow, that tells you that that skill targets the state standard. And if you see red, that means this skill is exceeding the state standard. So we've included some skills that exceed the state standard because we know that sometimes in preschool we have students who are ready for that. So we've included those as well in there. So looking here really closely, after we do the CBA with our students, and we do that kind of at the beginning of the year, we'll have information about students counting their knowledge of numbers, and then some information about their knowledge of small number recognition without counting. So that's really kind of fluid, quick counting done without saying the numbers out loud. So if you show a student a group of 3 blocks, they can say 3, there's 3 there, without having to count them out. That's what we mean by small number recognition without counting. So the initial starting point is always in these skills is always determined by that CBA. And all students are going to start somewhere here at the top with counting and number recognition, either with counting and number recognition of numbers 1 to 5 or small number recognition without counting 1 to 5. So we know that students aren't able to recognize numbers without counting until they have some knowledge of numbers. So if they don't have numbers or knowledge of numbers 1 to 5 yet, we're going to start them there before we move on to small number recognition. And then we'll move across counting and number recognition, and then down to more than, less than, same, and across there, and then down and across, and so on and so forth. Okay. So one thing that I'd like to point out here is these skills that are listed in red. So we've already said that these skills exceed the Ohio State standards. So our goal by the end of preschool is that all of our students have had exposure to each of the standards that we expect them to know by the end of preschool. So as we're progressing top to bottom, and left to right, when we hit a skill that exceeds the state standard, we're going to skip it for now. And we're going to bump down and then across and down and across. And anytime we come to a skill that exceeds the standard, we'll skip it so that we can bump down. And the goal there is just exposure to as many different concepts and skills as possible. Then once they've made it down here to the bottom, and we know that they have had exposure to all of those state standards and they're ready to go, then we'll go back and we can, if we have time in the year, I should say, we'll go back and we'll do work with these skills that exceed the state standards. Okay. All right. So for every skill, we have a pretest and a post-test. The first pretest is the CBA. So we've already talked about that. The first pretest for counting and number recognition is the parts of the CBA, part 2 counting, part 3 numbers, and part 4 small number recognition without counting. The CBA is done one-on-one, so individually with students, but remember, again, it's really quick and it gives us a lot of helpful information about our students. All of our other pretests are written in a small group setting. So we're not going to be doing a pretest for our students one-on-one every time we move to a new concept. Every other pretest is written in a small group. So we're going to be assessing our students' knowledge in a small group. So we do it that way to kind of cut down on assessment time, and we can gather a lot of great information from our students about their skill level and their knowledge level from the small group setting. We really don't need to pull them individually every time we're ready to move to a new concept. Okay, so you see here at the top, we have information on what the pretest is. And then down here, we have a section on interpreting the results of that pretest. So this is different for each of our skill levels. So the results will tell you specifically, if a student scores this way, then you're going to do this. If they show you this, then you're going to do this. So you kind of follow along there with that interpreting the results piece, and it tells you exactly where to go in relation to that list of standards there. So you'll know exactly where to go for that student or that small group of students. Okay. All right. So what's next? We know we've done the CBA with our students. We have information about their knowledge of math concepts and math skills. You've grouped your students accordingly into small groups of generally 3 to 4 students is best for a small group in math. You've grouped them according to their knowledge, and now you're ready to start doing these math small groups. What's next? How do we do that? Okay, first, let's talk about what you need for those small groups. You need a few things for your math small groups. You need your second read lesson plan, which we've already taken a look at here, and you find that in your unit manual. You also need a targeted skill lesson plan. So you know, your small group, you know their specific math skill level needs. So you're going to go to your math manual and you're going to pull out your lesson for that specific need. You can see this is a lesson for counting and number recognition 1 to 5. So you want to have the lesson plan that targets your small group's skill level and needs. You want your manipulatives that are specific to the book and related to the theme. So we had the book, One Happy Tiger. Our manipulatives, we always have, or I shouldn't say always, but most of the time we strive to have two options for our math small groups manipulatives. The first option needs to be purchased. It's something to be purchased. And you can see for One Happy Tiger, we have a little set of, they're very small, tiny stuffed tigers that you can use as your manipulative there. And then we also have a lower cost or really almost free option where you need to print and laminate. And we know that if you are in a school that cost of free, maybe is something that you don't necessarily see. You don't see the cost of printing and laminating, but sometimes if you're in a different setting, you might see the cost of printing and laminating. So we would consider that to be our lower cost option there, because there is often a cost with printing and laminating there. So we understand that, but we've provided a lower cost option for each of our books as well. So you can see here our lower cost manipulative here is a set of picture cards that relate specifically to the book. There's your One Happy Tiger and your two little bugs that the tiger sees and your three birds. These all relate back to the book that we're reading, okay? And there is a set of manipulatives for each book that we're working with. So looking at your targeted skill lesson plan really determines your flow of your small group here. Okay, so when you sit down with your small group, you've got them targeted by their skill level, you're going to look to this skill lesson plan to really help you flow through the lesson. So starting here up at the top, it tells you specifically what materials you need to gather before the lesson. And then we always have a warm-up here. And you'll notice here next to each of the sections, we have a target for amount of time to spend on each of these pieces. Altogether, if you follow that flow and that set of times that we've set out for you, you should be able to finish your math lessons in 10 to 15 minutes. They should never go more than 15 minutes because we have preschoolers, and that's really all that is appropriate for them, and all that we need them to attend to is really 15 minutes tops, but most of our lessons are in the 10 to 12 minute range, if that. Okay, so following that, we've got our breakdown of our steps and a little indicator of how much time to spend on it here. And you can see the warm up here is really, it's rote counting with a number line. So they're pointing to numbers on the number line and they're counting together. And we say that that can take 30 seconds. Really, that's probably a high estimate. You can hand out those number lines and have them count with you really quickly. So the warm up is just a way to kind of get them into the lesson, get them moving and get them going with it. And it's also a way for us to bring in more of the Ohio Early Learning State Standards. So the warm-up ties into the basic skill that we're covering in the lesson, but it's an additional way to bring in extra skills in a quick, easy way there. And you'll note here, you see that green arrow. So you know that this warm-up activity is moving toward the state standard. We aren't quite meeting the state standard here with this yet, but we are moving toward it. Okay, so the next part of our lesson here is the reread of the story, which should take about 3 to 4 minutes. And this is where you're going to bring in your reread lesson plan that you find in your unit manual. So you've got some ideas of things to cover before, during, and after. But really what you're going to be doing is either a really quick reread of this story, or you're just going to be kind of highlighting some of the pieces of the story. But again, I'm not sure I've actually mentioned this yet. We do consider our math small groups to be an oral language practice activity. And that is because it relates back to our theme. So we're using some of the same vocabulary, some of the same language that we're using in our theme. And we really are asking our students to talk and engage with the math concepts here. So this is where the oral language piece of the math lesson ties in here with this. So you're going to take your reread lesson and you're going to kind of tie it into this reread of the story here. Again, spending just about 3 to 4 minutes going through the book, tying it back to the theme, highlighting some key concepts from the book. Then next, you'll model the activity, which should take about 2 to 3 minutes. So we've really carefully scripted this piece here. And modeling the activity is one of the newer pieces that we've added in from our observations and from our work with our teachers, our lovely teachers, and we're in a variety of classrooms right now, and we get such great feedback from our teachers and our students. And we were seeing, and we heard from our teachers also, that this piece is kind of tricky. Sometimes we want to, our tendency is to just kind of jump into the activity and really quickly explain, okay, today we're going to be counting. All right, here, this friend, can you count this number of manipulatives? So really jumping into that activity. But what we saw was that our young students, our preschoolers, really benefit from a clear model of the activity first. So the teacher is really going to take 2 or 3 minutes to demonstrate exactly what they want the students to be doing in the lesson. So here it's really scripted out for you exactly what you're going to be doing, modeling for your students this new skill that you're introducing them to. Okay, and then there's the student practice piece, and we've got some notes in here about error correction, how to correct errors that you see. Again, you can see our green arrow here pointing to the left, which tells you this student practice activity with numbers 1 to 5, that's moving toward the state standard. We're not quite there yet, but we're moving toward the state standard. So then about 3 to 5 minutes of student practice. And in the student practice piece, as much as possible, you are giving the manipulatives to your students. They are moving them, they are touching them, they are pointing to them, they are using their voices to show that they understand this new concept and to practice the new concept. Okay, so that is a math small group. Again, we know that they're roughly 10 to 15 minutes, no more than 15 minutes at a time. We do recommend that each skill is repeated about 4 to 8 times. Some of the skills take more or less time to learn, so you're really going to pay attention during your small group with your students because they give you a lot of great information about their knowledge and progress. So as you're doing your small group, you're really paying attention to your students and gathering information about their knowledge and progress there. Once you think your students are ready, after about 4 to 8 exposures, you're going to do your post-test on your skill. So post-test looks very similar to your pre-test. The first post-test is the CBA again. So you're going to refer back to parts 2, 3, and 4 of the CBA. So the first post-test again will be done one-on-one, but after that, after your initial post-test, you're going to be doing all of your other post-tests in small group. Okay, we gather a lot of information about our students as they're working in small groups. It helps us to move really quickly through things. We don't want to pause for a really long time, pause our instructions so that we can gather information about our students and then jump back into it. We want to gather that information as quickly and seamlessly and without interruption as possible. So all of our other post-tests are written in the whole group setting. And then again, just like with the pretest, we have a section here on interpreting the results. Okay, so for each lesson we have, or each skill level, we have a pretest and a post-test, and there's a piece on interpreting the results. But we also have this skill progress guide here to help you kind of progress through the series of skills. So starting at the top, doing the CBA, then it tells you to do that lesson for the current skill 4 to 8 times. Then you move on to the post-test. If your students demonstrate less than 100% accuracy, you're going to move down the left side of the skill progress guide. If they demonstrate 100% accuracy, you're going to move down the right side there. So as we kind of move through and flow through these lessons, we can refer back to the skill progress guide to help us make our decisions about where to go next with our students. What do our students need here? Okay. All right. Oh boy, we are moving really quickly. We're going to be done a little bit early today. So in summary, our math small groups are aligned with our Ohio Early Learning Standards. They cover all of our Ohio Early Learning Standards, either within that student practice piece or within the warm-up piece of the lesson. And the goal is exposure to all of those standards by the end of preschool for all of our students. Our math small groups are homogeneous small groups based on their math knowledge level, and we initially gather that knowledge from the CBA, but after that, we're using our pre and post tests to gather that knowledge, and these small groups are flexible. As we gather information about our students, we're going to see students who are really taking off, they're progressing quickly, so we're going to maybe move them to another group, or we've got students who are moving a little more slowly, so we need to meet their needs by moving them to another group as well. So we keep these groups really flexible. They're constantly changing throughout the year. So we use our CBA to determine our initial starting point, and then we have our pre and post test to guide the following progression there. So our first pre and post test is that CBA, which is done one-on-one. The rest are done in the small group setting. They're highly scripted, and there's a guide to interpreting the results there to help you figure out where to go next in skills. Okay, so going back to our skill progress guide here, if you follow along the left side, we talked a little bit about this with if within our initial post test, our students demonstrate less than 100% accuracy, we're going to move down and we're going to repeat that lesson on that same current skill another 4 to 8 times. Again, really paying attention to their knowledge and how they're progressing within that small group setting so that we know when to do the post test again. So when we feel like they're ready, they might have that information, we're going to move on to the post test again, somewhere within that 4 to 8 lesson range. When we repeat the post test in the small group, if there is less than 100% accuracy after that second range of, or the second set of lessons on that same skill level, then we're going to move our students on to what we're calling math intervention. Okay, so within a one-on-one setting, we're going to meet their needs with that current skill level in this intervention setting. But we are still going to move them in the small group setting back up to the next level of lessons, if that makes sense. So we're going to continue to move them on with their small group so that they're continuing to be exposed to the next set of skills, but we are going to remember that they still need exposure to this one concept that they weren't able to master within the 2 sets of lessons on that skill. So we're going to move them into intervention with that skill. And we're still working right now on developing that intervention piece, the math intervention piece, and we are working with our teachers closely to develop that. But it will likely look something like our playful interventions that we have for alphabetics. So a really fun, engaging way to practice that skill in a one-on-one or maybe 1 to 2 setting with our students. And it's only necessary for our students who are showing that they haven't quite mastered that skill within the small group setting, but it'll be a really fun, engaging way to practice that skill again. Okay. All right. And that brings us to the end there. So thank you for your time on this. For some of us, an icy, snowy Saturday morning. For others, it seems like it's a lovely, lovely morning. So thank you for joining us. I hope we answered some of your questions about math and basic concepts. We do have plenty of time if anyone would like to stick around and ask some questions. This is my address here, my email address at the bottom. So I am the person to email if you have any questions after reviewing this lesson here. So we have some time for questions. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Rosie. That was fabulous. So nicely explained.
Thank you.
One thing that I just wanted to make super clear, I know Rosie mentioned this, but we get a lot of questions about this. So we only have 2 to 3 math books in each unit, but that doesn't mean you just do math 2 to 3 times. So once a math book is introduced in a whole group, then what we do is use that material across the whole next couple weeks until that next math book is introduced. So a lot of what we have found to be helpful is make like a little math basket so that you can kind of grab your math manipulatives and pull your little group and have everything you need, like the math manual materials, the book, all that good stuff right there. Because we really hope that people are doing math small groups, 3 to 5 times a week, depending on your schedule, and half day and whole day. We know there's lots of configurations, but frequent math groups each week is the expectation. And sometimes the one unit will end and there's not a math book in the next unit until maybe week 2. And that's okay to keep using the math materials from the previous unit until that next math book is introduced. Because the idea of tying it to the math, as Rosie the idea of tying it to the unit, as Rosie nicely explained, is to get at that oral language and more opportunities to use some of that vocabulary from the themes. But the actual skill work is so important, and we want to do that frequently. And you might not be, if you've done the same book 4 or 5 times, you probably aren't going to be reading that book again unless it's just a huge favorite. But just, referencing the pages with the counting or the math components on them. So
Thank you, Amy. Yeah, that was very helpful. And as you were talking, I was like, oh my goodness, I forgot to mention our expectation for how many times we're doing math groups across the week. So thank you for that.
lot to cover.
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
Lots of information to cover there. So yes, just bringing them back again. And like you said, that reread of the story that becomes